Welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we strip away the noise to analyze today's breaking stories. It is February 6th, 2026.
Usually when we sit down to do this, we're looking at one major event, a singular point of impact.
Right, a big story we can really unpack.
But today feels different. Today feels like a convergence point. We aren't just looking at a news cycle. We're looking at the simultaneous collision of three massive civilization-altering crises.
It does feel heavy today. It feels like the floor is dropping out. I'm looking at the stack of reports we have here. Economic data, intelligence leaks, diplomatic cables, and it doesn't look like business as usual.
No.
It looks like a game changer.
It is. If you just look at the board, we're witnessing the potential total collapse of diplomatic talks with Iran, which puts us inches away from a kinetic war. At the same time, we have a domestic economic situation that I can only describe as a bloodbath that Washington is desperately trying to ignore. And then the third pillar, the release of documents that suggest the President of the United States, and frankly a huge chunk of the Western elite, might be compromised by a foreign intelligence service.
And we aren't talking about vague anxieties or, Twitter rumors here. We have the hard data to back this up.
We do.
We're looking at a 205% explosion in layoffs just in January. We're looking at a missile with a 2,000-kilometer range being unveiled in a literal underground city.
An underground city. It's incredible.
And we have FBI files naming specific intelligence officers handling Jeffrey Epstein. This is not speculation.
Exactly. It's a perfect storm. You have the war machine revving up abroad, the economy hollowing out at home, and a leadership class that might be operating under blackmail. So we have a lot to unpack.
We do. Let's start with the most immediate threat to global stability. The situation in the Middle East. We've been tracking the diplomatic talks in Muscat, Oman. These were supposed to be the off-ramp. This was supposed to be the moment cooler heads prevailed. But according to the reports we have on the desk, specifically looking at the analysis from the diplomatic correspondents in the region, that off-ramp has been demolished.
Demolished is the right word. To understand why, we have to look at the context of the room. These are indirect talks.
Right. They're not even in the same building.
Not even close. The Americans are in one hotel, the Iranians in another, and Omani intermediaries are shuttling back and forth. But the U.S. position, according to diplomatic sources leaked to the press, wasn't a negotiation. It was an ultimatum.
An ultimate.
The phrasing used was this or nothing.
This or nothing. That doesn't sound like diplomacy. That sounds like a demand for surrender. But let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Oh, what?
Isn't that just standard hardball negotiation? You start high, they start low, and you hope to meet somewhere in the middle.
Normally, yes. But in high-stakes nuclear diplomacy, you usually offer a roadmap, a pathway. You do X, we do Y. What made this different and frankly dangerous was the specificity and the complete lack of reciprocity.
Okay, break that down. What were the specifics?
The U.S. demands were incredibly specific and maximalist. One, they demanded Iran halt all nuclear enrichment immediately. Not just the high-grade stuff, mind you, but all of it.
All of it, wow.
Two, they demanded Iran hand over 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium to a third country. Just give it up.
And the third one was the real sticking point.
The third one was the deal breaker. They demanded a hard limit on ballistic missile ranges.
Okay, let's pause on the missile ranges. We know from the analysis provided by folks like Dr. Mohammad Marandi and others that the missile program is a red line for Iran. But why? Why is that the hill they are willing to die on?
It all goes back to the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. For years, Iranian cities were bombarded with missiles from Saddam Hussein, and they had absolutely no way to respond. They couldn't hit back.
They were defenseless.
Completely.
Yeah.
And since they don't have a modern air force to compete with the U.S. or Israel, their missile program is their only deterrent. It's the only thing they believe is stopping a regime change invasion. So when the U.S. says, limit your missiles, Tehran hears, put down your shield so we can hit you.
So Iran's response was categorical, a flat no.
Absolutely. They refused to even discuss missiles. They refused to discuss their regional influence. They view these as non-negotiable red lines. To them, the U.S. isn't asking for a deal. They're asking for capitulation. And this is where this new price doctrine comes in. This is a fascinating shift in rhetoric we need to look at.
Right. This comes from the advisor to Iran's supreme leader. I have the quote here. He stated that dilution of uranium is possible. They could bring that 60% enriched stuff down to 20%, but he said. This comes with a price, and that price must be fully paid.
The price must be fully paid. That is transactional language.
Yes.
That is not the language of a country that's scared or backed into a corner.
Oh, no.
That is the language of a country that believes it has leverage, serious leverage.
So what kind of price are we talking about here? Are we talking cash?
It's likely a package deal, full sanctions relief, especially regarding their oil exports, and probably some kind of security guarantees. But the phrasing implies upfront payment.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in the past, specifically with the JCPOA back in 2015, Iran did all the work first. They poured concrete into their reactors, they dismantled centrifuges, and then they had to wait for the U.S. to maybe lift sanctions.
Which the U.S. eventually reneged on anyway.
Exactly. They got burned. This price doctrine suggests Iran will not move an inch. Not one centrifuge will stop spinning until they see the payment clearing, so to speak.
Yeah.
They are rejecting the idea that they have some kind of moral obligation to disarm first.
And because the U.S. arrived with this take-it-or-leave-it attitude?
The talks have hit a brick wall. They are effectively dead.
And while the diplomats were hitting that wall in Oman, something very, very dramatic was happening back in Iran. Just hours before these talks were scheduled to begin, Iran unveiled something that changes the entire military calculus: the Khorramshahr-4 ballistic missile.
The timing was impeccable. You don't do that by accident. That wasn't a coincidence.
No, that's a message.
It's pure signaling. And you have to understand, this is a monster of a missile. We are talking about a 2,000-kilometer range.
Let's just contextualize that range for the listener. 2,000 kilometers isn't just next door. That covers the entire state of Israel. It covers every single U.S. base in the Middle East. It covers parts of southeastern Europe.
It does. And it carries a 1,500-kilogram warhead. That's a massive payload, capable of taking out hardened targets like bunkers or air bases. But the technical detail that really matters here, the thing that keeps military planners up at night, is the fuel.
It uses liquid fuel, right? I thought liquid fuel was the old technology. I thought solid fuel was the scary stuff because it's ready to launch instantly.
That is the conventional wisdom, and usually you'd be right. Old school liquid fuel missiles, like the old SCIDs from the Gulf War, take hours to fuel up. You have to bring in the tanker trucks, you pump in these volatile chemicals. It's a nightmare.
But while you're doing that, you're a sitting duck.
You're a giant target. U.S. satellites see you, they see the heat signature from the fueling, and a drone or a jet takes you out before you can even launch.
So why go back to liquid fuel? What's the advantage?
Because the Khorramshahr-4 uses a new type of storable hypergolic propellant. It's stored in ampoules, essentially field cartridges, inside the missile.
So the fuel's already in the missile.
Exactly. It's stored, sealed for years. It doesn't need to be fueled on the launch pad. It combines the energy density and thrust control of liquid fuel with the ready-to-fire speed of solid fuel. This system allows for a very, very fast launch sequence. It essentially negates the primary advantage of a preemptive strike because you won't catch them fueling on the pad. There's nothing to see.
That is a crucial nuance. It's not just a big missile, it's a survivable missile. And speaking of survivability, they didn't just roll this out on a parade ground in Tehran.
No, they did not.
We have the footage of Major General Abdurrahim Musavi inspecting this missile in what can only be described as an underground city.
This is the visual that defines this new era of deterrence. These aren't just silos. We need to be clear about that. These are vast subterranean complexes carved deep into mountains.
It's incredible to see.
We're seeing miles of tunnels, logistics centers, command posts, all buried deep enough to survive standard bunker-busting bombs. The message Iran is sending with that footage is absolute survivability. They're saying, you can hit us with everything you have in a first strike, and it won't matter. We will still be here, underground, and we will fire back.
It feels like a scene from a Bond movie or something, seeing these massive missiles lined up hundreds of feet underground. But the doctrine behind it is very real. Musavi actually explicitly stated this shift. He said, and I'm quoting, that Iran is shifting from a defensive doctrine to an offensive doctrine based on asymmetric and crushing strategies.
Crushing.
That sounds like a terrifying escalation in rhetoric.
It is a major doctrinal shift. For decades, Iran's public posture was, if you hit us, we will defend ourselves. It was reactionary.
Right, don't tread on me.
Exactly. Now, the language is, we will crush you proactively if we even sense a credible threat. It's designed to deter the U.S. from thinking a limited war is possible. You know, the Pentagon loves the idea of a limited war. Bomb a few sites, degrade their capabilities, go home. Musavi is saying there is no such thing as a limited war when you're facing underground cities filled with 2,000-kilometer missiles. Any strike will be met with a massive, crushing response.
And the U.S. seems to be operating under this maybe outdated assumption that they can isolate Iran, that they can rally the world against them like they did with Iraq. But looking at the geopolitical map, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, does it?
No, the isolation strategy has failed completely. It's a relic of the past. Look at the reactions from the major powers. China has explicitly affirmed Iran's right to peaceful nuclear energy and has publicly warned against military force.
And Russia.
Russia has kept its offer to host Iranian uranium open, positioning itself as a mediator, not an adversary. They respect Tehran's decision. The axis, if you want to call it that, of Russia, China, and Iran is solidifying. They are coordinating diplomatically, economically, and militarily.
And it's not just the big powers. I was stunned to see the reports about the regional players, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, even Egypt.
They're terrified.
They have refused to allow their airspace or territory to be used for strikes on Iran.
This is the absolute nightmare scenario for Washington. The traditional Arab allies, the ones who are supposed to be the staging grounds for any attack, are saying, count us out. They see the Khorramshahr 4. They see the footage of the underground cities. And they know that if the U.S. launches an attack from their soil, they become target number one in the retaliation.
So the U.S. is isolated.
Completely.
Okay.
It's Washington and Tel Aviv against the region, with Russia and China providing a strategic backstop for the other side. It is at the brink of a world war, and the U.S. has almost no regional buy-in. It's an untenable position.
Which begs the question, why? Why push this hard right now? Why the ultimatum? Why the rush to conflict when the risks are so high and the allies are so few? It seems irrational.
It does seem irrational.
And that brings us to the second crisis, the one that might just explain the irrationality of the first.
The Epstein files.
The Epstein files.
This is where we have to put on our detective hats and look at the concept of leverage. Because when a government acts against its own rational self-interest, like risking a catastrophic war without regional support, you have to ask if there is an unseen hand on the wheel.
And the new batch of Epstein files, specifically the FBI documents released just this week, suggests that hand might be blackmail.
It's an explosive suggestion.
Now, before we go further, we need to be very, very precise here. We aren't talking about internet rumors or anonymous message board theories.
No, this is critical.
We are talking about an official FBI report citing a confidential human source.
Correct. This is official Bureau documentation that has been unsealed.
And this source claims unequivocally that Donald Trump has been compromised.
Compromised. And specifically compromised by Israel. The allegation in the files is, well, it's shocking. It references sexual blackmail tapes, what the intelligence world calls compromat, that may exist in a Tel Aviv vault.
A Tel Aviv vault.
The implication in the document is that this leverage is being used to force U.S. foreign policy, specifically regarding a potential war with Iran.
That reframes everything we just discussed. If the President of the United States is operating under the threat of having these tapes released, then the this or nothing ultimatum to Iran, it makes a lot more sense.
Stops being strategy.
And it becomes desperation. But is it just Trump? Or is this bigger?
Oh, it's much, much bigger. The files, when you connect them with other open source information, paint a picture of a massive, multi-decade intelligence operation. We have quotes from Ari Ben-Menashe, a former Israeli intelligence officer.
Right.
He didn't mince words in his assessment. He said, this is a quote, "They trapped a number of U.S. presidents by using Jeffrey Epstein. The Israelis have the American government captive."
Captive, that is an incredibly strong word coming from a former intelligence officer of that rank. It implies a total loss of sovereignty.
It is the only word that fits if the allegations are true. And look at the evidence trail. Look at Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel.
His name is everywhere in these files.
Everywhere. His name appears over 4,000 times in the Epstein archives. 4,000 times. This wasn't a casual acquaintance or a one-time meeting at a conference. This was a deep, sustained relationship. We have audio recordings of Epstein coaching Barak on business dealings.
And those business dealings are terrifying in their own right. We found emails where Ehud Barak is pitching a spy firm called Carbine. I want to dig into this because this isn't just about real estate or hotels. What is Carbine?
Carbine is a company that markets itself as a next-generation 911 emergency platform. It sounds good on the surface.
It sounds helpful.
But the technology underneath it allows for the remote activation of cameras and microphones on any smart device running its software. It gives you a backdoor into the citizen's pocket. It's a mass surveillance tool.
And who does Epstein email about this? Who is he trying to bring in on this deal?
Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir.
Palantir, the massive data analytics firm used by the CIA, the NSA, the military, the entire intelligence community.
Exactly, the nexus of power. And in that email from Epstein to Thiel, he states explicitly, in black and white, I represent the Rothschilds.
I represent the Rothschilds.
It completely reframes who Jeffrey Epstein was. For years, the media told us he was just a perverted financier who liked to party, a lone wolf.
Right, a weird rich guy.
But when you connect Ehud Barak, Corbijn, Palantir, and the blackmail allegations, Epstein looks like a state-level intelligence operative. He was likely running a honey trap operation on an industrial scale to acquire leverage over Western elites. The partying wasn't the goal, it was the mechanism of capture.
But if you look at the mainstream media right now, I'm looking at headlines from the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, they're running with a very different story.
A very convenient story.
They're calling Epstein a Russian agent. They're saying he was Putin's wealth manager. Where is this narrative coming from?
This is what independent analysts are calling Russia washing. It's a classic intelligence misdirection tactic. Look, the argument from these analysts is that the media is desperate to deflect from the real story. The overwhelming evidence, Robert Maxwell's documented history as a Mossad asset, the Ghislaine Maxwell connection, the 4,000 Ehud Barak contacts, the threats to Trump found in the FBI files, all of it points in one direction.
So why the Russian spin? What's the purpose?
Because if the public accepts that Epstein was a Russian asset, it fits the current Cold War narrative. It's safe. It makes Putin the bad guy again, which is a comfortable story for Western audiences.
Right. It reinforces the existing paradigm.
But if the public accepts that an ally, Israel, has been systematically blackmailing the U.S. government for decades to force it into wars, that collapses the entire Western alliance structure. It's a truth that is simply too dangerous for the establishment to print. So they blame Russia.
And it's not just the U.S. facing this exposure. This is a global scandal. We have to look at what's happening in the U.K. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing calls to resign.
He's in serious trouble.
Why? Because he appointed Peter Mandelson as the new ambassador to the U.S.
And Peter Mandelson has deep, deep ties to Epstein. It's the same pattern everywhere. From the UK to Norway, where former Prime Minister Thorbjørn Jagland is now under investigation for his Epstein connections to the U.S., the Epstein class is being exposed.
What do you mean by the Epstein class?
It's this unified, compromised block of global leadership. They all went to the same parties. They all flew on the same plane. They're all in the same black book. And now they are terrified. And a terrified leadership class is an incredibly dangerous thing. They will start wars. They will crash economies. They will do anything to keep the focus off their own corruption.
It's almost like they're trying to break the system before the system breaks them, which transitions us perfectly and tragically to the domestic front. Because while the elites are potentially playing this four-dimensional chess with blackmail and missiles, the American economy, the actual engine that keeps people fed and housed, is absolutely cratering. They're calling it an economic bloodbath.
It is a bloodbath. And what's so frustrating is that if you listen to the official White House line or you just look at the stock market, you'd think everything is fine. GDP is up. But we have to explain why GDP is up.
How is it up if things are so bad?
It's fueled by government spending and massive, massive debt issuance. It's artificial. It's a sugar high. If you strip that away and look at the actual labor market, the real economy where you and I and our listeners live and eat, it is in a depression.
Let's get into the hard data from the January labor report. The numbers are undeniable. 108,435 layoffs announced in January alone.
That is a staggering number. Let that sink in. That is a 205% increase from December.
205%.
And it is the highest January layoff total since 2009. Think about that. 2009 was the absolute depth of the great financial crisis. The housing bubble had burst. Lehman Brothers was gone. Banks were failing. We are back at those levels of job destruction right now, today.
And usually people will say, well, the unemployment rate is still low. But there's a catch there, isn't there? It's not about who's getting fired. It's about who's getting hired.
Exactly. The unemployment rate is a lagging indicator. It's a look in the rearview mirror. The leading indicator, the thing that tells you where we're going, is hiring. And new hires dropped to 5,300.
Wait, can you repeat that number? 5,000?
5,300 new hires. That is the lowest number on record since data tracking for this metric began in 2009. It is effectively zero. We are in a hiring freeze economy. It's a low hire, low fire stagnation that has suddenly turned into a cliff dive.
So what does that mean for someone listening right now?
It means that if you lose your job today, you aren't finding another one. The door is shut. In 2022, you could walk across the street and get a raise. In 2026, you were falling into a void.
And look at who is cutting. It's not just, tech startups running out of venture capital. It's the corporate giants.
The bedrock of the economy.
Amazon cut 16,000 roles. UPS cut 30,000. Dow Chemical cut 4,500. These aren't failing companies. These are profitable behemoths. Why are they cutting if they're making money?
That's the key question. This isn't about survival for them. It's about extraction. Executives are explicitly citing productivity gains from technology and advanced automation as a reason not to backfill open roles. They are realizing they can run the machine with fewer humans.
So they're choosing to do this.
They are making a choice. They are looting the labor force to juice the stock price for shareholders. It's a structural shift, not a cyclical downturn.
The Tyson Foods case study really brings this home for me because numbers like 108,000 are abstract, but Tyson closing a pork plant in Lexington, Nebraska, that is visceral.
This story breaks my heart, honestly. Tyson is shutting down this plant. 3,200 jobs lost. Now, you have to understand, Lexington, Nebraska is a town of 11,500 people.
So do the math on that.
That is nearly 30% of the town's entire population unemployed overnight.
That destroys the town. It destroys the tax base, the schools, the local businesses, the grocery stores, the restaurants.
Everything. It turns Lexington into a ghost town. But here's the thing that should make everyone furious. Was the plant losing money?
That's what I was going to ask. Was it unprofitable?
No, that's the kicker. By all accounts, it was profitable. But Tyson wants to consolidate. This is about monopoly power. By closing the plant, they constrain the supply of pork in the market.
And basic economics says lower supply.
Means higher prices. So you, the listener, pay more for bacon at the grocery store. And by firing the workers, they cut their labor costs. So they charge you more, pay their workers less or not at all, and the executives and shareholders pocket the difference. It is corporate consolidation and price fixing masquerading as business strategy.
So they're squeezing the consumer and the worker at the exact same time. It's a two-front war on the middle class. And where is the government in all this? Where are the elected officials who are supposed to be protecting these towns?
Well, let's look at the political response. Senator Pete Ricketts promised to look into the closure. He made all of the right noises for the cameras.
Okay.
Then immediately after, reports surfaced that he took a round of campaign donations from Tyson.
Of course he did.
It's the same cycle of corruption we see over and over. The politicians are paid by the corporations to look the other way while they hollow out the American heartland. So you have a potentially compromised president, a compromised Congress, and a corporate class that is cannibalizing its own workforce. Is it any wonder people feel like the system is rigged? The domestic stability that usually allows a president to take risks abroad? It doesn't exist.
It feels like the walls are closing in from every single side. And speaking of closing in, we have to talk about the shadow war that's happening in the background of the Ukraine conflict. Because while we focus on Iran and the economy, things in Russia just took a very dark, very spy thriller turn.
They did. We often talk about the fog of war, but this is the fog of assassination. We have credible reports of an assassination attempt on Lieutenant General Vladimir Alexeyev.
This isn't just some random field commander. Who is he exactly?
He's the deputy chief of the GRU Russian military intelligence. He's a heavy hitter, a very powerful figure. But more importantly for this story, he is Russia's #2 negotiator. He's the guy in the room trying to cut the deals to end the war.
And he was shot multiple times in the back in his own Moscow apartment.
Right. This wasn't random. This was a professional hit. And the timing is what makes this so explosive. This happened immediately after peace talks in Abu Dhabi between Russian, U.S., and Ukrainian delegations concluded.
Wait a minute. There were peace talks in Abu Dhabi. I didn't see that on the nightly news.
Of course not. These were secret back-channel negotiations. This is the Abu Dhabi track. The goal was to find a quiet way to end the war. And the moment Alexeyev steps away from that table and goes home, someone tries to kill him.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated he has no doubt that Ukraine was behind the attack. But why? If Ukraine is losing the war on the battlefield, wouldn't they want peace? Why try to kill the negotiator?
Because of who stands to lose the most from peace. Zelensky.
Oh.
The analysis here suggests that Zelensky and his inner circle are vehemently opposed to the Abu Dhabi track.
Why?
Because it sidelines him. He knows that secret negotiations between the U.S. and Russia likely involve land concessions he can't accept politically. If the war ends on those terms, his government likely collapses. By trying to kill the negotiator, Kyiv is effectively trying to blow up the negotiating table. They're trying to force the war to continue because peace at least the piece being discussed in Abu Dhabi, is a direct threat to Zelensky's political survival.
It's a dirty war tactic. If you can't win on the battlefield, you start killing the people who can actually end the war. We've seen other incidents like this, right? This isn't a one-off.
No, it's a pattern. We've seen drones targeting Putin's Valdai residence. We've seen car bombings of political figures in Moscow. Lavrov warned about this explicitly. He signaled that if this dirty war continues, Russia might walk away from negotiations entirely.
And that's incredibly dangerous.
It's terrifying. The military-to-military deconfliction channel between the U.S. and Russia has barely just been reestablished. It's a fragile lifeline to prevent nuclear escalation. This assassination attempt was a deliberate effort to cut that lifeline.
So we have foreign wars, economic collapse at home, and assassination plots sabotaging peace deals. The world is getting more dangerous by the day. And the response from the U.S. government domestically seems to be brace for impact, but not by fixing the economy, not by helping the people of Lexington, Nebraska, by arming the police.
This is the final and perhaps most disturbing piece of the puzzle. When a government knows it is failing its people, when it knows the economy is crashing and unpopular wars are looming, it doesn't try to win hearts and minds. It gears up for control. We are seeing the militarization of Homeland Security on a scale that is, frankly, terrifying.
We need to talk about the budget numbers here because they are just astronomical.
The budget for ICE immigration and customs enforcement has exploded to $85 billion. $85 billion.
Put that in perspective for us.
That is larger than the entire military budgets of most major nations on Earth.
Yeah.
That is not a budget for checking visas at the airport. That is a budget for an internal army.
And we aren't just seeing them at the border anymore, are we? We are seeing ICE and CBP agents deploying into American cities, Minneapolis, Chicago, Portland.
And look at how they are dressed. This is key. They aren't wearing standard police uniforms with badges and name tags. They're wearing full combat plate carriers, helmets. They look like they're about to raid Fallujah.
And the weapons?
Military-grade weaponry. They're using surveillance tech, like Palantir, there's that name again, to track people's movements. It is a paramilitary force operating on domestic soil.
But legally, how can they do that? How can they operate in Chicago? Chicago isn't on the border.
But legally it is. The legal definition of the border zone was expanded to extend 100 miles inland from any port of entry. That includes international airports and major seaports.
So because O'Hare Airport is there...
Chicago's in the border zone. New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Miami... They're all technically in the border zone. And within that zone, your civil liberties are effectively suspended. Authorities can search you, your car, your devices without a warrant.
So the Constitution essentially has an asterisk next to it for 2/3 of the American population that lives within that zone.
Precisely. And we're seeing the definition of terrorist expanding too. Post 9/11, it was Al-Qaeda. Now it's domestic dissenters. Look at the shooting of activists like the person known as Alex in Minnesota. Authorities labeled them terrorists post-mortem to justify the use of lethal force.
This sounds exactly like what the journalist Spencer Ackerman has been warning about for years.
Yes, the death squad warning. Ackerman's analysis is that these agencies are operating with total impunity. They have effectively become internal paramilitary forces that answer only to the executive branch. It doesn't matter who is president, Democrat or Republican. The machine is built, it is armed, and it is pointed squarely at the citizenry.
It is a lot to process when you stack it all up. The looming war with Iran, the Epstein blackmail files, the job market collapse, the shadow war in Russia, and the rise of the police state at home. It paints a picture of a system in absolute freefall.
I'm not sure it's freefall. It might be a controlled demolition of the old order. The world is on a razor's edge. We have a compromised leadership class in the West potentially being blackmailed into a catastrophic war with Iran to hide their own crimes. While at home, the economy is being hollowed out by corporate looting, and the police state is arming itself against the inevitable unrest that will follow. The distraction is the war. The reality is the theft of your future.
That is a sobering thought to end on. But it is the reality we have to face if we want to navigate what's coming. Awareness is the first step.
Absolutely. Awareness is the only defense we have left.
If you found this analysis valuable, hit the plus or follow button on your podcast app and give us a like. Subscribe to the Hot News channel for more deep dives. Until we meet again. Goodbye.